story continues on my cheap BMW 135, but this time we're diving deep into the guts of the engine. Problems are brewing. Ever since I bought Australia's cheapest 135i, it's been one step forward, two steps back. So it looks like we've got a leak. Costing only 15,000 Australian dollars, can I really complain? However, today we're going to find out exactly why this BMW may have been so cheap after all. So we've got a misfire. Good times. Let's see, give it a code read. Combustion misfire, cylinder 5, exhaust Vanos mechanism, boost pressure control deactivation. So what that means is we're... No, just kidding. Basically, somewhere in the combustion area, we have an issue. We have spark plugs, coil packs, and injectors. Spark plugs are a maintenance item. They go pretty regularly, especially at high boost. Coil packs, also maintenance item. They probably don't need to be replaced as frequently as spark plugs, but do need to be replaced. And then injectors, they're the big daddy. They're the expensive one. They can get leaky. Direct injection engines are prone to these kinds of issues, so we're going to be upgrading those as well. So as you can see, we've got a whole swag of goodies. Starting off, we've got the one-step cooler NGK spark plugs, 6 of them. These are what's recommended for non-stock applications. You could go 2-step cooler. I don't think I'm at that point yet, but we'll see in time. Got the Elder coil packs. Some discussion amongst what's best. B58 coil packs seem to be a bit of a hot item right now, but I'm sticking with the Elders, which are being what's recommended for quite a while. And then of course we've got the Index 12 injectors, the big daddy, the expensive ones, what everyone is struggling to find or paying a bomb for. Thankfully I got these a little while back. And of course those decouplers to make sure that they fit correctly. So this process is relatively straightforward. We're going to kick things off by removing the old parts. We're going to remove the cowl, take off the engine cover, take off the coil packs, dive into the spark plugs, get them out, and then we'll have to gap the new ones. So quick inspection, everything looks to be pretty much okay. We're having the issues up in cylinder 5, so we'll just keep on at it, get to the spark plugs and replace them. First step, removing the coil packs. So again, this is pretty simple. Coil packs are these ones here, connected by the wires. So just flip these up and that naturally pushes out the wire, so disconnect that. These can be sometimes in a little bit tight, but you can either wiggle them out or you can get your extension bar and just pull them out like that. So we've already discovered our first win of the day. So these are the new Elder coil packs, and these look like, I believe, Delphi, the old ones. And you have a look at cylinder 6, this one is gone. Surprisingly, this is not the one that has been misfiring. It's actually cylinder 5. Which leads me to think that it's not coil related, but swapping these out does give me relief. So for the spark plugs, we're going to be using this special thin-walled socket piece. I'll have a link in the description of where you can get these. So we've now got all of the spark plugs out. You can see they've got some corrosion wear on them, some more than others. Funnily enough, cylinder 5, which seemed to be having the misfires, seems to be the cleanest. So whether that represents it wasn't firing properly and was too tight, who knows? It's really hard to say, but it is the odd one out, so that definitely is saying something. Comparing these to new is where you really start to see the difference. So on the left we have our new spark plugs, the right, especially this one, we have the old ones. Looking forward to the performance this brings. But we're not done that easy with the spark plugs. So with these spark plugs, you can see that there is essentially a little tip and a gap. That gap is where the electricity sparks, which creates the ignition in the chamber. So these are not pre-gapped to size. Because we are going one step cooler, we need to change the size of the gap between the electrode and that little curvy metal bit at the top. To do that, we have a special gapping tool. I will have a link in the description for you to purchase this if you're interested in doing this yourself. To know what gap, we've got this special feeler tool as well. So we need to gap these to 0.022 inches, which looks like it is 0.559 of a millimeter. The spark plugs will come with too large of a gap, so check the size and we can start to reduce that gap. Screw the plug into the gapping tool until it meets in the middle. Partial turn here will decrease the gap. Using the feeler gauges, you can now measure your results. 0.022 needs to still fit through, but you don't want anything larger than that. So if you over gap it like I did, just get your flathead and gently pull it up without touching that middle electrode. You've got to be very delicate and protective of that, whereas the top part you can bend slightly and then just re-gap it. So the way to test if you've gapped this correctly is get your 0.22, make sure it fits in, that does. Then you can go up to the next size and just check that this doesn't fit. You can see that this won't go through. This is the 0.24. That means it's gapped correctly. For those of you at home, my DIY tip is to only slightly turn that gapping tool as it changes quite quickly. But don't fear if you do over gap it, it's just modifying, going up and down, it's pretty easy. So now that we've gapped all these, we're just gonna reinstall them back into the car. So now all we need to do is repeat the process in reverse with the addition of a torque wrench. So it turns out my torque wrench didn't even go as low as it needed to for the torque setting on those spark plugs. So I found a different torque ratio, basically get them hand tight and then do 1/4 of a turn more than hand tight. So if you do have a torque wrench that can go that low, it is 17 foot-pounds or 23 Newton meters. So now for the coil packs, these are pretty easy. Just plot them in, push them down until they're properly seated. You can see some alignment in there. It's about 4 o'clock if you're looking vertically. I just press it down until they can't go in any further, then reconnect the wire up and then just lock it down. And that's good to go. Spark plugs and coil packs are done. So if you're not replacing your injectors, you can stop here and you're sorted. For everyone else, now it gets a little bit trickier. So as a quick overview, this is a recap. We've put the spark plugs in, put the coil packs in, we've reconnected all of the wires for every cylinder. Next, we need to organize our new injectors, write down all the codes and start to replace them. So if you're replacing your injectors, this step is critical, otherwise they won't work. With your injectors, there's 2 critical steps. Firstly, you do need to have couplers and add on fresh couplers when you're installing these. The second step is to record these numbers here on the left. They're the flow rates, just here, these 6 digits there below the, looks like a QR code type of thing. That determines the flow rate of the injectors, and the ECU needs to know these individual flow rates per injector. Other thing to note is what index they are. These are index 12, which means the latest revision. We're gonna check what we have on the car as we take them out. So you'll see the flow rates are different on each injector. You can write these down. I'm just gonna take a photo of each and make sure that I put them in the correct order. But before that, we need to remove the old injectors. While I was working, my little best friend Bear arrived back from his walk. Bear is always happy to give some advice and even a kiss or two. Now we're adding the couplers that hold in the injectors. So for the injectors, we're going to be removing these fuel lines to start with. I've got the towel in here because I've heard that there could be a tiny bit of fuel seepage. My understanding is these are 14mm bolts. I don't have a 14mm wrench, so I've just got an adjustable one here. Start with the right, move to the left, and then take them off in pairs as they're connected down the bottom there, if you can see. It is important to keep these in order as they are all uniquely individual to their position, so make sure you keep track of that.
It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
So not gonna lie, that freaked me out. Wasn't expecting that much fuel to be left in the fuel rails after sitting overnight, but we've since disconnected the battery just to make sure that there's no chance of any sparks or the fuel pressure system injecting more fuel. And we're just gonna continue and be a little more delicate with that wrenching. So we've now removed the first two fuel rails. That allows us access to this injector holder. I also removed the first two coil packs just to get better access to these fuel lines. So if you are doing this, I recommend doing that as well. As mentioned, I'm keeping track of where each of the fuel rails are in terms of position in line with my injectors. So another handy trick. So next we're going to be picking off these little wires. So if you can see in there, I'm just gonna use a little pick tool to pull it off, and then we can pull the injectors out. So I didn't click record, but we have now picked this off. But you can see the injector is ready to be pulled out. And in the theme of today's video, we have a special tool for that. So this is the special tool. It's pretty basic. It's a metal shaft with a heavy weight, which is sort of it's no easy way to say it. You basically it off, you pull it up like this, and the momentum hits it off the top. So this will be a bit of a laugh. Now we're going to use our strange tool to get it in there, get it under the injector. Got to just sort of line it up. Then we've got to sort of seat this tab into the fuel line to keep it tight, and then we just pull it up. That's our injector out. So first injector we have is an Index 9. So we're going to keep the order of these to make sure in case when we're updating the flow charts that we know which is which. So we've got two Index 9s so far. These have been written on, so 1, 2. You can see someone else followed a similar process. So now we'll take off the caps on the new injector. The front cap you only want to take off just before you're putting it back in. So you have a couple of minutes because it expands. So we're going to take this off and rush it over. So caps off, you can see the seal here. This gradually expands, so that's why you've got that short time limit. So the trick with these is to add the fuel lines back on before you add the brackets back on, because they need a little bit of give, and the trick is to tighten them up partially on both sides so they get seated in the correct position. So these are now both finger tight. We'll add the bracket back in, and then we'll tighten these up with a wrench. Not gonna lie, this is stressful. Okay, so you would have seen when we took this out that the bracket is concave. It needs to be concave downwards to apply pressure to the injectors, keeping them in place. So we're gonna install this downwards and then screw it back in. This process can be a little tricky. I used an extension magnet to help place the plate in the correct position. So after a little fiddling, we have got the plate in place. You can see it supporting down there. Now we're just going to tighten that up. I'm not going to lie, those back two 5th and 6th cylinders almost broke me. So we are finally done. All of the coil packs in, all of the spark plugs in, all of the new injectors in, fuel lines back on. The final step is we need to code these injectors, so we'll get onto that shortly. So these are the bad boys here. Nothing super obvious in terms of the condition. Cylinder 6 was a little crusty, but that wasn't the one we had issues with. It was actually this bad boy here that we're having the misfires on. Cylinder 5. But one thing does stand out is that this is an Index 9 and these two are Index 7. So the injectors are considered two banks, bank 1, bank 2, and you're meant to have all of the same index on a bank. So these are 999, 797. So perhaps by being a Index 9 amongst 7s, that could have been causing some issues. To be fair, this is all just hearsay, and I'm just hoping that I've solved the problem. So one thing I love about this new screen is the fact that I can directly access Pro Tools and MHD straight from the car with a big screen. If you didn't catch my install video, I'm going to link it up the top right now. So coding our injectors should be relatively easy. We're going to be using Pro Tool today. So first up, we've got it on Wi-Fi adapter because of the MHD adapter. Got the correct chassis, so we are E82 connect. So we're going to go to engine, we are going to go to functions, then we're going to injector coding. So from here, we're going to take the photos we took earlier and code in the new value. So injector 1, I'll try and put this up on the screen. We had 593210, confirm, 593210, code. So it says here the last 2 digits of the value entered may be slightly different due to DME adjustments. This behavior is normal. So if you ever notice there's slight variations from what you entered, that's expected. So now just to code the rest. Okay, so that's all the injectors coded now. So we can see the values, they're represented here. We're done, that's it. Now to give it a test. So I'd be lying if I didn't say I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm very excited. So let's give this a test go. Well, that was an absolute fail. So in true cheap 135i form, my battery appears to have died just at that critical point. So rather than risk it with this dodgy battery, I'm getting a new one. It probably hasn't been replaced in a long time. So on to that now. Remove the negative first and be careful when handling batteries. Don't forget the brackets as they will block you on the positive side. Before lifting the battery, make sure to disconnect the bottom bracket and the ventilation tube. Alright, old battery's out. Now to put the new one in. Putting the battery back is even easier than taking it out. Do everything in reverse, connect the positive side first and then the negative. Now to quickly code the battery, as I believe the old battery was not a GM and the new battery is. So back into Pro Tool, I click the ECU, battery swap. So currently it's on 70 amp hours standard. We're gonna go to 70 AGM. Finalize, confirm. That's it, easy. All right, time for attempt number 2. Looks like we're all working, we're all running. It was a bit scary there for a moment, but we got there. So we have 3 important questions to answer. 1, is it fixed? 2, was it worth it? And 3, do I recommend buying a cheap BMW? So 1, is it fixed? Well, the answer is mostly I've fixed the top end issues. On a cold start, I do have a couple of stumbles, which may be related to that Vanos solenoid. I was identified in those original faults. I'll be fixing that in a future video, so make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. So question 2, was it worth it? I think it was worth it. It was definitely an expensive fix and one of those more expensive fixes on an N54, but these are the reasons why these can come cheap. I still don't think that there's almost anything value to money that can get the performance of an N54 for the cost, so I do think it was worth it. And finally, number 3, do I recommend buying a cheap BMW? This really depends on whether you're willing to get your hands dirty and fix that car yourself. If I had to professionally pay for every fix done on this car or required on this car, it would have cost an absolute bomb. So no, I don't recommend buying a cheap BMW if you're not willing to get down and dirty, but if you're willing to give it a go, I definitely recommend, as these can be very rewarding when you finally do get these fixed. I've learned so much on this journey and hopefully you have too. So until then, see you in the next one. Peace.